Let's begin.
E equals MC squared. Carry the 2. Oh, hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Just testing a few theories, but it seems to me that although some things can be done, they should never be attempted. If you're interested in calculating your own conclusions, listen up to tonight's experimental account that I like to call We Were First.
The wind was picking up, and the sky was becoming thick with dark gray cloud cover. One good thing is that traffic was more than limited. There was a broadcast earlier that day, warning people in the country of a possible impending natural disaster. A tornado warning, to be precise. Now, the difference between a warning and a watch is whether or not a tornado has actually been spotted. During a tornado watch, the conditions are right, the jet streams and storm patterns are facilitative of one, but no actual tornado has yet to be reported. During a tornado warning, one has indeed been reported within the storm system, and individuals in the area are advised to take shelter. For one, I was living about 30 miles south of the storm system, and secondly, I would have to head in the opposite direction in order to get to work, so the immediate danger eluded me, and I knew that I'd have no trouble making the commute. To make matters even more reassuring, I work in an underground facility, so I honestly didn't figure on any life-threatening situations, despite the environmental rampage up north. The roads were a little blustery, and the rain had begun to set in by the time I neared my turn for the complex, but I was parked and on my way indoors before the real violence of nature had set its focus in the sky above. First was the guard station. This was no typical guard station, like the ones in courthouses or town clerk offices. This was nothing short of a separate building on its own that one would have to pass through in order to reach the complex beyond. Inside were various stations, security personnel, metal detectors, and 2 armed riflemen at each and every metal detecting booth. On most nights, I would get Alfie and Ed, 2 stern-faced, bulging bald men that could likely scare the chrome off a bumper with nothing more than a menacing sneer. Still, I never had anything to hide, and saw these 2 guys nearly every single night, and I really enjoyed fucking with them. They took it all in stride, seeing as they saw me every single day for 12 years, but I made sure to never take it too far for fear of drastic repercussions, like a cavity search. Essentially, these guys were the real deal, fully prepared to use weapons that they carried if they felt the need to do so. But tight security here was most certainly a must, considering the kind of work that went on there. Mostly nuclear research, particle behavior experiments, and the like. That's what I did. I was part of a scientific research team conducting anti-gravity experiments through the induction of contained quantum fields. Technical jargon aside, we essentially created a quantum field by resonating particles within a given space to produce a stable quantum field in which space within remained separate from the space surrounding it, reducing the mass of objects within the field, facilitating anti-gravity. That is a really boiled down version of it all, but I sincerely doubt that any of you are listening to this desire to listen to a lecture on advanced physics, quantum mechanics, or superstring theory. But in actuality, this experiment was my downfall. Possibly the downfall of us all. It happened a little after 8 o'clock. I began my shift at 4, so I was a little more than halfway into the night. In hindsight, I suppose one of us should have been prepared for it. Someone should have run the calculations, but I guess it just got overlooked. Everything was fine. We had run about 3 tests so far, each with promising results. On the 3rd test, we got the electromagnetic field generator to lose a total of 7% mass. I know that might not seem too astonishing, but think about it. A similar object weighing 100,000 pounds would become 7,000 pounds lighter. To a quantum physicist, this is a mind-blowing result. We had been getting decent results up until then, but nothing even close to 7%. It was when we began to run the 4th experiment that it happened. I would find out later that the upper levels had been devastated by a tornado, but at the time, all I knew was that power had been shut down with backup generators instantly kicking in, the blue emergency lights turning on. Maybe something happened to the transformers or the lines. Maybe it was the immediate response of the generator. But there was a sudden power surge. Most of the lights grew brighter until blacking out with a snap. And then, nothing. Everything had been shut down. The rest of the laboratory crew began shuffling and clamoring in the dark. Everything so black, my eyes may as well have been shut. Then, a single red, blinking light. From somewhere in the darkness, nothing else to be seen. Just that blinking red light caused an absolute, deafening silence. Everybody stopped, stood still and silent. Everything was shut down, and nothing down there ran on a portable energy source. Everything was powered through the hard wiring of the building and the backup generators. There was some quiet murmuring among the others, generally unrecognizable whispers coming from indiscernible locations in the black. Then, a sudden jolt of what I can only describe as black lightning. It behaved like a bolt of electricity, but bore a dark, purplish hue, very similar to the glow of a blacklight. This anomaly arced between the field generator and the mainframe in the opposite corner of the area with a snap, moving and twitching in place as it bridged the gap between the devices, crackling loudly, only for a few moments, before disappearing just as suddenly as it had sparked into life. That blinking red light that seemed to signal the phenomena was no longer present, but the mainframe began to light up and process information, underscored by the sounds of mechanical movement and clicking. 2 men ran over to it, figuring there may be some sort of power surge, but even that wouldn't have made any sense. There was absolutely no power in this portion of the complex, and, unbeknownst to me at the time, anywhere else in the complex either. I tried using the interface console, but nothing was responsive, as if everything was still powered down, but the computer mainframe still clicked and processed away. I went to shout out that my attempts were unsuccessful when the small, crane-like mechanical arm, used for making precise calibrations, reached out with a whine and clamped onto one of our interns' heads from above while they were inspecting the main computer. It was their screaming that caused me to first notice what was going on. But before I could make a movement, or my brain could even make a decision as to what the hell I should do, it fucking tore that kid's head right off his shoulders. My God. There was blood everywhere. There was so much screaming, and there were still no lights at all. I thought I heard more mechanical movements and the sounds of some screams being cut short, but I was too busy running down a pitch-black corridor, leaving whatever was going on behind me. before I got the unfortunate opportunity to have a look for myself. There's one thing that you gotta understand about this place. Navigating the upper buildings in the pitch black without the help of an elevator would have been challenging enough. But the underground annex is nothing short of a 2-mile-long rat maze, with no lights and completely terrified by what I had just witnessed. I soon found myself turned around and unsure of my exact whereabouts. The screaming was distant enough to assure me that I had put some significant distance between me and that place. But as I called out in a moderate intensity around me, asking hello in hopes of getting a response, I got nothing. I was completely alone where I was. If anyone else had managed to escape that room, they had most certainly taken an alternative route. Then, the screaming in the distance stopped. I listened on for what seemed like fucking weeks, but I'm sure it was only minutes. I probably should have taken the opportunity to look for an exit, but I found myself unable to move, unwilling to move for quite some time. My logical brain couldn't wrap itself around what had just taken place. Sure, a computer malfunction or some type of sabotage maybe, but I had never seen anything like that. The remnants of his spinal cord dangling from the opening beneath his jaw, the blood spouting out of the large wound in geysers, painting their surroundings in a dark crimson, silhouetted by the flickering lights of hard drives running programs and processing information. And that scream that turned into a high-pitched squeal as his esophagus was stretched to an elastic snap. I started to vomit right where I stood. With the absence of light, my mind replayed the mental imagery so vividly over and over again. And as my regurgitate slapped at the floor beside my shoes, I heard the most disturbing sound that I have ever heard in my entire life. A sound that was so impossible, I don't think human words would be capable of accurately describing it. Some kind of mechanical squeal, like a bad alternator belt, but one that sounded as though intentionally attempting to mimic a human scream. This unsettling noise happened only once, but reverberated off the surrounding walls over and over again. It shook me to my absolute core. My breathing became more rapid, my heart raced out of control, and my mind began to become clouded with panic. I had no way of knowing how the hell to get out of where I was. Considering all electronic devices had been checked at the gate, or left in one's vehicle, I didn't even have a cell phone with me to lend its assistive glow. My standing in isolated fear would not last much longer, though. And although I would soon no longer have need for the luminescence emanated by my tiny phone screen, I would also soon be wishing I was left to my own devices in the darkness around me. It started with a light, a soft, very faint white light, something like a dying LED. As the sounds of clanging metal slowly crescendoed, more and more horrifying details slowly presented themselves. First, the lights grew from a small dot into two separate, larger ones, glowing side by side. The clang of metal against the cemented floors carried with it the distinguishable cadence of human stride. A flashlight, maybe? I remembered thinking to myself. "Hello?" I called out into the darkness. The clanging mechanical movements persisted. "Hello? Who is that?" This time, the sound, the movements, the up and down bobbing of the approaching white lights ceased. And then, as if spoken through some kind of fucked up PA system,
"We were first."
I had no clue what that meant at the time, but Looking back with my current assumptions, it makes perfect sense, and sends chills up my spine at the thought of what I may have possibly helped unleashing into our world. I lost my will to respond to it, to try calling out to it. At that moment, I understood one thing, and one thing only. That thing was not human. Then, it began moving again, moving ever closer towards me.
We were first.
I didn't know what to do, what direction to run, but as it approached, the glow of what I assumed to be eyes began to light up the nearby walls with the dim brightness of 2 distant flashlights, becoming increasingly less distant with each clanging step. And with each approaching step, the faint sound of something wet slapped the floor behind the metallic bang. But as this horrifying thing approached me, it also helped reveal my escape. The increasing light revealed where I was, ironically, only steps away from the stairwell, something I would hope would lead me out of this hell into my escape. Now, I'm not sure what exactly started them. Maybe it was the previous surge in electrical power, but there were small, very small, and only a few piles of burning refuse on the stairs behind that door. But what proved significant about them was the light of which they gave off. Not enough to cause a glare or a striking contrast from the darkness beyond the doorframe now behind me, but bright enough to light up the details of anything within its vicinity, specifically the creature that breached the threshold moments after I had begun my trek up the first flight of stairs, stopping me short with a sudden interest at the first landing. I think I noticed the smell first, and if I didn't, it was strong enough to make an initial, lasting impression. Something surprising considering the mangled horror I was about to land my eyes upon. The aroma was that of backyard barbecue, burnt hair, and the dull smell you get from an electrical discharge. When I turned around, it spoke to me again, but I didn't even care, as gut-wrenching as the sound was. What looked to be the mutilated remnants of a human being, intertwined with protruding steel and wire, stood in the stairwell doorway. Beams of soft white light shot from within 2 sockets that used to house human eyes. The connections between the head and neck, the appendages to the body trunk, and most of the joints seemed to be crudely stuck together. Moving metal parts and colored wires mixed with thick, sticky blood, torn flesh, and gruesome chunks of gore showing between them without the covering of skin. Then, I realized something. The intern. The boy who was decapitated by that mechanical arm. It was his head. What was left of his face, but crudely fashioned to the lower torso of one of the larger team members.
We were first.
It yelled at me. I never looked back. No matter how many times that thing called to me, echoing its way up through the stairwell, I never stopped or looked for fear that it may have been right behind me. I did manage to make it to the top of the stairs and managed to close the door. The devastation was beyond belief. Nearly the entire building had been torn down from the high winds of a Central American tornado. The upper levels of each of the buildings completely gone. You may be wondering why I failed to mention my name, or any names for that matter, the other employees, the organization, etc. Well, that's because after my report of what happened down there, I was, let's just say, forced to resign. What the company didn't know, however, because I was given some of the files that day to review before I consulted with my superiors, is I was able to obtain copies of the data. I've been sworn into silence by a court of law, but I feel compelled to get this out there, lend out warnings to those who would listen about what I have unleashed upon us all. You see, the measurements don't only record losses of mass within the quantum field. They actually collect data to detect variations in space-time, which includes measurements that indicate mass. The data that was recorded made no clear sense. That is, at first. A boiled-down version of it. When the backup generators came online, it caused a power surge that increased the output to the field, which in turn caused a gravitational reverse, creating a singularity within the quantum field with an intense gravitational pull. The field contained this pinpoint, unsurmountable mass object within it, but essentially created a stable black hole contained within its own separate space-time within the field, or something called an Einstein-Rosen bridge. This I clearly understood. What I didn't comprehend at first is why the readings indicated a lack of space-time completely within the field, as if it was not present at all. Then I remembered. We were first. Religious individuals will have you believe that there was nothing before creation, nothing before existence, before time. But whatever that place was, linked to via that quantum field, was what was before time itself. True evil reigned over this realm before our existence, and somewhere, buried under a seemingly average field in Kansas, a being with the power to consume us all is waiting to be unleashed.
That just goes to show all those who stick their noses where it doesn't belong. When you push Mother Nature, she just may end up pushing back. You know what they say, it's best to leave evil right where it is, in your own hearts and dark desires. But if you're looking to step into some seasonal terror, drop in next weekend, knee-deep in the 13 days of Halloween. But until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications, so I can catch you all again next Saturday.